HIV-positive. The words rang in Miriam's ears as she looked at Dr. Amina in shock. At only 17, pregnant and scared, Miriam felt like her whole world had fallen apart. How could she tell her parents this terrible news? Mirriam Namdi's story begins. Miriam's hands shook as she held the small A6 white envelope the doctor gave her, proving her HIV test results in the hallway. The doctor's words kept echoing in her mind. Miriam stood frozen in the clinic hallway, tears streaming down her face. Her gaze drifted to her parents, sitting anxiously in the waiting area, their eyes filled with concern. The doctor's words kept replaying in her mind as she walked towards them. She asked herself, how could she possibly break the news to her parents? She told herself this revelation would devastate them, coming mere months after discovering her pregnancy. Miriam felt scared, ashamed and unsure. The baby inside her, once a surprise, now felt like a burden. She decided to keep the secret for a little longer. Her mother's concerned voice broke the silence. "What is it, my dear? What haven't you told us?" Miriam hesitated, glancing at her parents. She couldn't bear to tell them the truth. Not yet. She thought about the countless times her parents had been worried about her, the numerous times they'd sacrificed for her. How could she add to their burdens with this sad news? The guilt and fear were suffocating her internally. "So," she answered, "the doctor just said I need a lot of rest at this point, Mama, so let's go home." Miriam lied, forcing a weak smile. Her parents exchanged skeptical glances because they could see she was hiding something but said nothing. So they entered the car and the drive home was silent. Miriam stared out the window, watching the familiar landscape blur past. She thought about the boy who had given her this virus. Did he know his HIV status before coming to her? Why did he do this to her? What did she ever do to him to punish her like this? She felt anger, sadness, and fear, all mixed. Her mind was racing. When they got home, Miriam went straight to her room. She curled up on her bed, hugging her pillow tightly. For the first time since she was a little girl, she cried out for her mother. She couldn't shake the feeling that her world was crumbling right before her. After an hour, Mrs. Namdi noticed she had not left her room to take her usual juice she always takes every night before going to sleep. So she went to her room and met her awake and lost in her thoughts. So Mrs. Namdi sat beside her on the bed. She stroked Miriam's hair gently, just like she used to do when Miriam was small. So she began. "My dear child," she said softly, "I know you did not tell us the truth at the hospital, but I want you to know you are a strong girl, stronger than you even know. I assure you, whatever the problem is, we will face it as a family, my child." Miriam thought of confiding in her mother when she leaned on her shoulder, but she thought again about how disappointed she would be. So she decided to remain silent. Over the next few days, Miriam struggled to come to terms with her diagnosis. She started taking her medication while hiding the real containers from her parents. But the side effects made her feel sick and even more tired. She worried constantly about her baby and what the future might hold. One afternoon, Miriam had a visitor. She was lost in her thoughts as usual when she heard a knock on her door. When she opened it, to her surprise, it was Mirabel, her good friend from school. Miriam had missed her a lot. Mirabel had heard that Miriam was sick and came to offer her support. With a sigh of relief, Miriam said, "Oh, Mirabel, my friend, it's so good to see you after such a long time. How are you and how's school?" Mirabel smiled and replied, "It's good to see you too, my dear. I brought you some fruits." She held out a basket and added, "I thought you might like some company." Miriam nodded gratefully and invited Mirabel to come and sit on the bed. As they sat together, talking and eating the mangoes Mirabel brought, Miriam felt hopeful for the first time since she got sick. Maybe, just maybe, she could get through this. Mirabel asked, "How have you been, my friend? And how are you coping with the pregnancy? I hope you've been taking care of yourself." Suddenly, Miriam started crying. She nodded and said, "Yes, I've been trying, but I feel like such a disappointment, Mirabel." Mirabel dropped the mango on the plate and gently held her hand and said, "Oh, Miriam, that's not true. Your parents are still alive and they've forgiven you. They love you and so do I. You are not a disappointment at all." "Why would you even say that?" Miriam wiped her tears and said, "Thank you for being so kind, Mirabel. Considering the way I treated you at school when you tried to always advise me. Honestly, I'm suffocating inside with this secret. I have to tell you something. I'm not just pregnant. I found out a few weeks ago that I'm HIV positive too. How can I even start to tell my parents again about this sad news? I feel like my life is over. Sometimes I even think about ending it because it's just too much for me alone." Mirabel was shocked but held Miriam's hands tighter. Both friends started crying. "Oh, my dear friend," Mirabel said, "I can't imagine the pain you're going through. But being HIV positive isn't the end, you know. As long as you take your medicine, you'll be fine, my friend. You need to stay strong for the baby growing inside you." She gently touched Miriam's belly. "But seriously," Mirabel added, "you need to tell your parents soon. You can't keep hiding secrets from them all the time. You can't keep this from them much longer, especially with the side effects of the medications you're taking. I'm surprised they haven't found out yet. How have you managed to keep this from them?" Miriam replied, "I put the medications in pain reliever containers so they wouldn't notice." Mirabel sighed and said, "Please, Miriam, tell them soon. They'll be more upset if you keep the secret from them. Trust me." Miriam nodded and promised, "I'll tell them this evening. I promise." She thanked Mirabel for being a good friend, unlike Amanda and Susan, who disappeared when she needed them the most. Mirabel just replied, "It's okay, my friend, you will be fine. Just stay strong for all of us." After 3 hours of heartfelt conversation, Mirabel looked at her time, so she stood up to leave. "I should go now, my friend, but I'll visit again soon, okay?" Miriam nodded, feeling grateful for her friend's support. "Don't keep the truth from your parents anymore, Miriam," Mirabel urged, her eyes serious. "They love you and they'll help you through this." Miriam promised, "I'll tell them tonight, I swear." As Mirabel walked out, Miriam accompanied her to the gate. They hugged tightly. "Thank you, Mirabel," Miriam whispered. "You're a true friend." Mirabel smiled. "Always, Miriam, stay strong." With a final wave, Mirabel left. Miriam watched her go, feeling a sense of determination wash over her. Later that evening, Miriam sat in her room, thinking about how she would tell her parents the truth. She was scared, but knew it had to be done. Mirabel's words echoed in her mind, giving her the strength to face the situation. After dinner, Miriam called her parents to the living room. Her hands were shaking, but she took a deep breath and began. Miriam sat between her parents in the living room. Her heart was beating so fast, she thought it might jump out of her chest. She took a deep breath and said, "Mama, Papa, I need to talk to you about something important," she said nervously. Her parents looked at each other concerned. "What is it, dear?" her mother asked gently. Miriam took a deep breath, tears already welling up in her eyes. "I'm not just pregnant. I'm HIV positive too," she blurted out, her voice trembling. "I found out that evening you took me to the clinic." Her mother breathed out and covered her mouth. Her father's face turned pale. For a long time, no one said anything. The silence was so loud that it hurt Miriam's ears. Miriam couldn't hold back the tears any longer and started crying. Finally, her father spoke. His voice was shaky. How? Why? We gave you everything, Miriam. How could this happen? Miriam started crying harder. I'm so sorry, Papa. I made so many mistakes. I thought I knew everything, but I didn't. I let bad friends lead me astray. Her mother pulled her into a tight hug. Oh, my child, she said, her voice full of sadness and love. We'll get through this together. Miriam's father stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the village, his shoulders slumped. Miriam wanted to run to him, to beg for his forgiveness, but she was too scared. Instead, she kneeled and started crying. What about the baby? Her mother asked softly. In her tears, Miriam explained what doctor. Amina had told her about the treatments that could help protect the baby. Her parents listened, their faces a mix of worry and hope. Her mother asked her again, why didn't you tell us that same day or earlier? Miriam sobbed. I was scared, Mama. I didn't want to disappoint you again. Her mother gently wiped away her tears and said, you could never disappoint us. What matters now is that you take care of yourself and the baby. Her father nodded. We'll get through this together as a family. We will support you every step of the way. Miriam felt a huge weight lift off her shoulders. She had been so afraid, especially with her father, who had not altered a word on her since her pregnancy news. But now, with her parents by her side, she knew she could face anything. As night fell, the Namdi family sat together, talking, crying, and trying to figure out what to do next. It was the hardest conversation they had ever had, but for the first time in a long time, they were truly talking to each other. Weeks passed, and Miriam occupied herself with learning about HIV and pregnancy. Slowly, she regained hope. Life would be different, but it could still be beautiful. One late afternoon, Mirabel visited again, and Miriam was relaxing on her favorite rocky chair, sporting her friend through the gate. She beamed with joy, setting aside her book as she rushed to hug her. Mirabel playfully warned Miriam, "No pregnancy falling on my watch, I'm broke, my friend." Miriam chuckled, "You'll be selling your kidney then." They both laughed and hugged warmly, filled with gratitude. "Mirabel, you're my rock. I don't know what I'd do without you," Miriam whispered. Mirabel playfully replied, "Probably nothing, my friend." Then, noticing Miriam's radiant smile, asked, "You seem incredibly happy today. What is behind the glow? Is everything okay?" Miriam beamed. "Yes, thanks to you." Mirabel's eyes sparkled with curiosity, while holding her two jaws playfully and asking, "What did I do to put this big smile on your face?" Miriam replied, "I listened to your advice," Miriam said. "I told Mom and Dad the truth," Miriam revealed, "just like you advised. It was tough, but surprisingly they understood. You gave me the courage to do it, so thank you, my friend." Mirabel's face lit up and widened in surprise, pride, and relief. "I'm so proud of you, Miriam. I told you everything would be okay." "You see now then," she smiled. From that day on, Miriam knew she wasn't alone. With her parents' support and Mirabel by her side, she was ready to fight for her future, her baby, and her health. Meanwhile, in the small township, word spread fast. Soon everyone knew about Miriam's pregnancy and her HIV status. Some people were kind and offered help. Others weren't so nice. One day, Mrs. Namdi decided to do her monthly shopping with Miriam in their small township market. While they were walking through the market with her mother, she heard whispers behind her back. "There she is," someone said. "The girl with the cursed disease and brought shame to her family." Miriam wanted to run and hide, but her mother squeezed her hand. "Hold your head up high," she whispered. "You're stronger than their words." At the market, some sellers refused to serve them. "We don't want your kind here," one woman said, turning her back on them. Miriam felt hot tears in her eyes, but before she could say anything, a voice called out, "Stop it! She's still one of us." It was old Mrs. Adebayo, Mirriam First Primary School Principal Township teacher. She walked up to Miriam and hugged her. "Child, we all make mistakes. It's how we fix them that matters." More people started to gather around. Some nodded in agreement with Mrs. Adebayo, while others frowned and walked away. While driving on their way home, Miriam and her mother met Mirabel on the way. They stopped and carried her as she was coming from school too. "I heard what happened at the market," Mirabel said. "I'm so sorry, my friend. Is there anything I can do to help?" Miriam hugged her friend, grateful for her support. "Just being my friend is enough," she said. When they got home that night, Miriam couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the embarrassment in the market, all the gossip, and how divided the township was because of her. She began to wonder if things would ever be normal again in her life or family. When she went for her next checkup in the clinic, Dr. Amina suggested that Miriam join a support group for young people living with HIV. At first, Miriam didn't want to go. She was scared of meeting new people and talking about her problems. But her mother encouraged her. "It might help to talk to others who understand what you're going through," she said. So one sunny morning, Miriam went to her first support group meeting. It was held in a small room at the clinic. There were about 10 other young people there. A kind-looking woman named Vera led the group. "Welcome, everyone," she said with a warm smile. "We're all here to support each other. Who wants to start?" For a while, no one said anything. Then a boy about Miriam's age raised his hand. "I'm Tom," he said. "I found out I was HIV-positive 6 months ago. It's been hard, but I'm learning to live with it." One by one, others started to share their stories. Miriam listened, amazed at how brave they all were. When it was her turn, she took a deep breath and started to talk. To her surprise, once she started, she couldn't stop. She told them everything about her privileged life, her bad choices, and her pregnancy. When she finished, she expected to see judgment in their eyes. Instead, she saw understanding and support. "Thank you for sharing, Miriam," Vera said. "Remember, your status doesn't define you. You're so much more than that." After the meeting, a girl named Grace came up to Miriam. "I'm pregnant too," she said. "It's scary, but we can do this. Want to be friends?" Miriam nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks, especially after the accident in the market. While Miriam was slowly finding support, her father, Mr. Namdi, truly was struggling. He spent most of his time alone, lost in his thoughts. He couldn't understand how things had gone so wrong. One day, he went for a walk in the township. He passed by the school where Miriam used to study. He saw children playing and laughing, and his heart ached for the carefree girl his daughter used to be. As he walked, he met with Mr. Okafor, one of his old business friends. "Namdi, my friend," Mr. Okafor said. "How are you holding up?" Mr. Namdi sighed. "I don't know what to do, Okafor. Where did we go wrong with Miriam?" he asked his friend. Mr. Okafor put a hand on his shoulder. "You loved her, Namdi. But sometimes love isn't enough. Children need guidance too." They sat on a bench under a small roundabout garden looking at people going about with their daily activities. Mr. Okafor continued, "Remember when we were young? Our parents were strict, but they taught us right from wrong. Maybe that's what Miriam needed." Mr. Namdi nodded slowly. "You're right. We gave her everything she wanted, but we didn't teach her how to handle it." As the sun began to set, Mr. Namdi looked at his watch and stood up. "Thank you, my friend," he said. "I think I know what I need to do now." walked home with a determined step. It was time to be the father Miriam needed. When Mr. Namdi got home that evening, he found Miriam sitting alone on her rocky chair as always. She looked up as he approached, her eyes full of fear and hope. "Papa," she said softly. Mr. Namdi sat down next to her. For a moment, they both stayed quiet, watching the sunset. Then Mr. Namdi spoke. "Miriam, I owe you an apology." Miriam looked at him, surprised. "But Papa, I'm the one who..." He held up his hand. "Let me finish. Yes, you made mistakes. But as your father, I made mistakes too. I gave you everything you wanted, but I didn't give you what you needed: guidance, discipline, and the tools to make good choices." Tears filled Miriam's eyes. "Oh, Papa." Mr. Namdi's voice cracked with emotion. "I was so afraid of losing you that I didn't set proper boundaries. But now I realize my job wasn't just to make you happy and prepare you for life. Can you forgive me, my child?" Tears streaming down her face, Miriam flung her arms around her father. "Of course, Papa. I'm sorry, Papa. Can you forgive me too?" Mr. Namdi hugged her tightly. "I already have, my child. I already have." Meanwhile, at the doorway, Mrs. Namdi watched, tears of joy rolling down her cheeks. Seeing her family reunited brought her profound peace and happiness. As they sat there, holding each other, Mr. Namdi made a silent promise. He would do whatever it took to help Miriam through this difficult time. They would face the future together as a family. As the weeks passed, Miriam's belly grew bigger. She continued going to the support group and taking her medication. Slowly but surely, she was learning to live with her HIV status. One day, Dr. Amina called with good news. "Miriam," she said, "your viral load is very low. If we keep this up, there's a good chance your baby will be born HIV negative." Miriam was so happy, she cried. She ran to tell her parents in the living room, who hugged her tightly. But there was still one big problem: Miriam's education. She had dropped out of school when she got pregnant, and she worried about her future. That's when her father had an idea. "Why don't you study from home?" he suggested. "I can hire a tutor to help you catch up." Miriam's eyes lit up. "Papa, you'd do that for me?" Her mother smiled. "Of course we would. Your life isn't over, Miriam. It's just beginning differently." So Miriam started studying at home. It was hard work, especially with her pregnancy, but she was determined. She wanted to make her parents proud and create a good life for her baby. As she studied, Miriam thought about all she had been through. She realized that despite making big mistakes, she had a chance to make things right. It wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to try. As her due date approached, Miriam's fear mixed with excitement. Despite everything, she couldn't help but love the little life growing inside her. She talked to her baby every day, promising to be the best mother she could be. Finally, on a warm night in September, Miriam went into labor pains and her mother rushed her to the hospital while her father paced in the waiting room. For hours, Miriam struggled through the pain of childbirth, but she was brave and strong. She thought about everything she had been through and knew she could do this too. The birth was long and difficult, but with the moral support and emotional support from her parents by her side and the skilled doctors at the hospital, she made it through. When she heard her baby's first cry, Miriam felt a love she had never known before. Finally, after what seemed like forever, a tiny cry filled the room. The nurse placed the tiny bundle in her arms. "Congratulations," she said with a smile. "You have a beautiful baby girl." Miriam held her daughter for the first time, tears of joy streaming down her face. The baby was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and a head full of curly black hair. Miriam kept looking down at her daughter's face, taking in every perfect detail. Meanwhile, the nurses quickly cleaned them up and called in her parents. When her parents came in, their faces were glowing with pride. "She's beautiful," her mother whispered. "What will you name her?" her father asked. Miriam looked at her daughter and smiled. "Hope," she said. "Her name is Hope." As she held little Hope, Miriam made a silent promise. She would be the best mother she could be. She would teach Hope all the things she had learned the hard way, the importance of making good choices, the value of true friends, and the power of forgiveness and love. For the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face whatever came her way. Then she looked up at her parents, who were beaming with pride and love. "Thank you," she said, her voice full of emotion. "For everything. I promise I'll make you proud." Mr. Namdi leaned down and kissed her forehead. "You already have, my dear. You already have." As the sun rose on a new day, casting its golden light through the hospital window, Miriam knew that this was not an ending, but a beginning. With her family's love, her newfound strength, and little hope in her arms, she was ready to write the next chapter of her story, one of redemption, growth, and unconditional love. The first few months with baby Hope were a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and round-the-clock feedings. Despite the exhaustion, Miriam's heart overflowed with a love she'd never known before. Her parents were her rock, providing unwavering support. They helped with baby duties, ensured Miriam took her medication on schedule, and showered Hope with unconditional love. Mirabelle's regular visits also brought sunshine into their lives. She will always arrive with a basket of fresh fruits in her hands, inquire about Miriam's well-being, and coo over Hope's tiny milestones. As Miriam navigated motherhood, she found strength in her support system. With each passing day, she grew more confident, cherishing every moment with her precious Hope. 3 months after Hope was born, Miriam got the news she had been praying for. Hope's HIV test came back negative. Miriam cried with relief and joy. Life wasn't easy with a new baby, but Miriam was determined to keep moving forward. She continued her studies and even started thinking about college. One day she got a call from her old school. They wanted her to come and talk to the students about her experiences. At first, Miriam was scared. What if they judged her? But then she thought about Hope. She wanted to make the world a better place for her daughter. So she agreed. Standing in front of all those students was the hardest thing Miriam had ever done. But as she shared her story, the mistakes she made, the consequences she was facing, and the lessons she had learned, she saw understanding in their eyes. "I'm not here to dictate your path," she said. "I'm here to remind you that your choices have power. They can transform your life forever. Tin. But most importantly, I want you to know that no matter how big your mistakes seem, it's never too late to turn things around and start anew." After her talk, many students came up to thank her. Some even shared their struggles. Miriam realized that by sharing her story, she helped others to avoid the same mistakes. After enduring unimaginable trials, the Namdi family found solace in faith. On a serene Sunday morning, they prepared to attend a nearby church, grateful for God's guidance through their darkest hours. As the village's wealthiest family, they had once valued material success above spiritual growth. But their recent trials had stirred a deeper connection with their faith, shifting their perspectives. In the church, the pastor's words on forgiveness and new beginnings resonated deeply. Miriam felt an unfamiliar warmth, while her parents discovered a long-absent sense of peace. After the service, they shared their story with the pastor, who listened without judgment. The pastor spoke of God's unconditional love and forgiveness, offering hope and guidance. That day, the Namdi family committed their lives to Christ. Regular Sunday church visits, family prayers and Bible studies became their foundation. Their newfound faith brought strength during hardships, humility despite wealth, and deeper love and forgiveness for one another. For Miriam, faith ignited hope. It empowered her to raise hope, continue her studies, and persevere through adversity. With her parents' support, Miriam completed high school through homeschooling, welcomed a healthy baby, earned a university spot, and pursued counseling to help others. Inspired by her own experiences, Miriam didn't give up. Years later, Miriam proudly graduated from university and landed a counseling job at the hospital where her dear friend Mirabel worked as a doctor. Together, they found joy in helping patients recover. Miriam often reflected on her past friendships with Amanda and Susan, who had dropped out of school because of their wayward lifestyle and now also struggling with life and health issues. She also remembered Tom, who gave her HIV but didn't take care of himself and eventually passed on. Miriam's trials and errors made her learn valuable lessons on how to choose friends wisely, listen to advice, and that it's never too late to change and start anew, especially with Christ's guidance. Reflecting on her transformative journey, Miriam was surprised at her growth. She realized that wealth without wisdom can lead to destructive paths, but with faith and resilience, redemption is possible. Years went by, and life had a way of coming full circle for Mirriam Namdi. On baby Hope's 13th birthday, the Namdi family decided to have an intimate milestone family celebration for baby Hope, who is turning into a teenager. After church service on that Sunday, the compound buzzed with celebration. The smell of jollof rice, pap, vegetables and grilled fish filled the air at the Namdi family home. Laughter came from the garden, where a long table was set for a special celebration. Miriam, now in her early 30s, stood proudly beside her parents. Mr. and Mrs. Namdi smiled with joy, a bit of wrinkles on their foreheads, showing the wisdom they had gained through many challenges and victories. Nearby, Miriam's child, now a teenager, helped set the table, a living reminder of hope and strength. Dr. Mirabel arrived, no longer in her white doctor's coat but wearing a colorful Ankara dress. She hugged Miriam tightly. Their friendship had stayed strong through the hardest times. Together, they had gone through medical school training, and now they worked side by side at the local hospital. As they gathered around the table, Miriam stood up, her voice steady and clear. Today, we celebrate not just our achievements, but the journey that brought us here. I was once a naive, young, and confused teenager, faced with an unexpected pregnancy. We've overcome HIV, stigma, judgment, and fear. What seemed like a mistake then is now our triumph. Miriam's eyes locked onto her daughter. Look at us now, united and spiritually stronger than ever. She turned to Hope, kissing her forehead tenderly. I love you, my little princess. You're the best gift I could have asked for. Mr. Namdi raised his glass. To my daughter and granddaughter, who taught me that true wealth is found in forgiveness and love. Mrs. Namdi wiped away a tear and added, and to second chances that brought our family even closer. Mirabel smiled and added, to a friendship that lasts through all storms. As they ate and shared stories around the table, Miriam thought about her past, hoping Amanda and Susan also found happiness someday. In this warm circle, Miriam felt at home. She knew she was right where she was meant to be. The sun began to set, casting a golden light over the gathering. In that moment, Miriam realized that every challenge had led her to this, a life filled with purpose, love, the strong bonds of family and true friendship. As laughter filled the air once again, Miriam knew that this was just the start of many more beautiful chapters to come. Miriam's redemption didn't erase her past, but empowered her to be grateful and always look ahead. Surrounded by love from her family, her 13-year-old daughter, baby Hope, and her one true friend, Mirabel, Miriam felt whole again. She was ready to embark on a new chapter of resilience, growth, and unbreakable love. Under the starry sky, Miriam made a promise. Hope will face challenges together with bravery and hope, always looking towards a brighter tomorrow. Hope is now a happy teenager too, a healthy little girl who brings joy to everyone around her, especially her grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. Namdi. They love their granddaughter very much, but they're careful not to spoil her like they did with Miriam. Miriam still lives with HIV today, but it doesn't control her life anymore. She takes her medications on time, stays healthy, and she is enjoying life. Life's journey is filled with choices, so choose wisely, learn, and never give up. Listen to wise advice from loved ones and true friends. If mistakes happen, don't despair. Learn and grow. Be compassionate towards those struggling. Miriam's story teaches us to transform our experiences into helping others. Remember, it's never too late to change. Don't face hardships alone. Ask for help. Your story isn't over. Write a new chapter anytime. Your life is precious. Use it wisely, love deeply, and never lose hope. Like Miriam, you are holding the power to transform your life. Faith can be your guiding light, offering strength and direction. Were you moved by Miriam's story of redemption and resilience? We'd love to hear from you. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Click the subscribe and notification button below to be part of our community. Don't forget to leave a comment. Share your thoughts on Miriam's journey because your feedback helps us craft better stories. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up too. Your support helps others discover our inspiring stories.